Hello, and welcome to another Civilization 6 video. Does this sound like you? Alright, so I went to the Steam winter sale and I saw that Civilization 6 was for sale, so I bought it and I downloaded and I got into the game, and then this era score thing popped up, and then there's ages and they're golden and they're dark, and I just don't know what's going on. Can you help me? What is happening? If that did sound like you, don't worry. My name is Bradley and I am here to help. I play Civilization 6 a lot. Most people would say far too much. Some people will tell you that I play very poorly. Some people will tell you that I play very well. It kind of depends on your perspective. If you want to check it out for yourself, we have a YouTube channel that you're hopefully watching this on that you can subscribe to. We got loads of videos, tutorials, gameplay, all that kind of stuff. We also have a Twitch channel that you should check out, link in the description. We play Civ on Deity all the time, so if you're here, you're new to Civ, and you want some tips and tricks to get to the next level, I can probably help you out a little bit. But also, if you're just here for the pure Civilization entertainment, you should still subscribe to the YouTube and follow the Twitch. That's what I'm trying to get. Let's talk about Era Score. Ladies and gentlemen, I am an idiot and also forgot to mention the Discord server that is also in the description. There's like 375 cool people hanging out. You should also come and hang out. We'd love to be friends with you. All right, we are in the game and we can finally talk about Era Score. This was a suggestion that came straight from Twitch chat today. Someone was there watching the AIPL. It was super fun, and they just typed in the chat, hey, can you do a video on Era Score? And I was like, oh my god, how have I not done a video on Era Score yet? That seems like a perfect idea. So here we are. Just keep in mind before we get started and as we go along here that Era Score ties in pretty intricately with a bunch of systems in the game. I'm going to try my best to talk about just Era Score today. So if I talk about just Era Score and I miss something that's Era Score adjacent, I probably did it on purpose. But Civ is a very complicated game. It's also a very subjective game. I'm just giving you my opinion. So if you think I missed something, or if you think I got something wrong, feel free to put it in the comments. You guys have been great at doing that on other videos recently. And then people can get a wide variety of Civ opinions and experiences by watching one video and reading the comments, and it's going to be very wholesome, and we're all going to learn together. The first thing we have to do to talk about era score is establish that there are eras in the game of which score is kind of relevant to them or applies to them in some way. The easiest way to check out the different eras is to head to this tech tree here, and they are all in the tech tree or the civics tree if you're more of a culture guy. We start in the ancient era here in most games. You can of course start in any era you like. We like to start in the ancient era here, and as you go through, you got all your ancient era stuff. Then we move to the classical era, then we got the medieval era, then the Renaissance era. You get the point. All the way up until the future era, and there's a bunch of stuff in between that we're going to talk about. As you play through a game of Civilization, you will be scored based on your performance in each era, kind of like getting a report card in school. How you attain score is very simple in concept, very complicated in nature. We're going to talk about all the different ways to get score later, but basically this score applies in this era. You can find out which era you're in if you're not familiar, or what your score is by looking at the bottom here. Right now we have 0 score. The 11 will be the next step we need to get to, but let's open this page up and see what's here. We have now entered the era progress screen. Apologies, that was completely unnecessary, but here we are. We have the ancient era. Here we have the turns until next era. This isn't really score related, but just so you know, the turns until the next era vary. There's 40 to 60 turns here. It varies on the AI and kind of how far ahead you are. It's based upon how many people are in the next era. If enough people tech in from the ancient era to the classical era, it will trigger the countdown to begin the classical era here. And so it's a little bit variable. Just know if you're playing on lower difficulties, your eras will on average be longer, giving you a greater chance to attain enough score. If you are playing on a higher difficulty, your eras will get shorter and shorter because the AI keeps pushing the eras forward. So just keep that in mind as we go along. Just below that, we have a picture of our sexy face, which doesn't help at all, but it tells us our current score in this era and our current age. It's important to know that this current score is the score that will apply to the next era, and this current age is for the era we're currently in, so it's a little bit complicated to try and figure out. Down here, though, is where you tell if your score is enough to hit one of these ages. There are 4 different types of ages you can hit in Civilization 6. There's 3 of them right here. The 4th one doesn't really show up. You have Dark Age, Normal Age, and Golden Age. We're going to talk a little bit later about why you want each of these eras and what you're kind of looking for. But basically, the more score you have, the better your age is going to be, and it gives you thresholds here. We are currently at 0 score. It says 0 right here. It says 0 right here. We have no score. We haven't done anything yet to be scored on, so we have no score. If we want to avoid a dark age, we need to get more than 10 score. If we want to go to a golden age, we need to get more than 24 score. So it's just giving us a threshold. So if we get 12 score, we hit a normal age. If we get 23 score, we hit a normal age. If we get 25 score, we hit a golden age. So that's very, very simple. And this will just update with the game. So you can always kind of click this tab here, and this information will always be current and updated. The missing age on this screen is a heroic age. Now, a heroic age is a slightly modified golden age. If you are in a golden age and you go to another golden age, you have now achieved another regular golden age. If you are in a normal age and you go to a golden age, you will get a normal golden age. If you go from a dark age, though, and you do the full shebang, the whole reading rainbow over to a golden age, you just skip normal. You're in a dark age, you get enough score to go to a golden age, and you skip the middle part, that's when you get a heroic age for basically being a hero. We'll talk about how that's slightly modified later, but it's the one that's missing on this screen. One of the most important concepts we need to talk about going forward is the idea that once you go past the amount of era score you need for a golden age, anything extra does not carry over to the next era and becomes wasted. Each era, when the game recalculates how much era score you need to get a dark age, a normal age, or a golden age, these numbers will change every era. When it calculates these numbers on the era flip in the game, it takes into account what your current era score is. So these numbers in each era will be different game to game to game. What that means is if I go over my era score, my maximum amount, so right now I have 9 turns left in the era, and I need 49 era score for a golden age. I currently have 46. So if I get 3 era score, I'm gonna get a golden age. Everything is good. We're gonna go into the next era, and none of it is a waste at all. If I get 10 era score, in the next 9 turns, and I have 56 era score, the maximum is 49. That means when we go to the next era, it's just gonna throw away the 7. Right, that 7 extra era score is not going to matter at all. So one of the things when we talk about era score is we want to make sure we're not going too far over once we hit a golden age, because going over, you only have so many options and so many ways to collect era score, and lots of them you can only do one time. So if you're doing things that give you lots of era score but you're already over your maximum amount, it may not be the most ideal thing to do, because you're then wasting that era score because it doesn't carry over to the next era. And the reason that's a big problem is if you go into a golden age, but you've gone over your era score by a whole bunch, you've taken away a bunch of opportunities to get era score that will apply later. So it makes it more likely that you will hit a dark age later in the game. And that's why that becomes a problem. It doesn't feel bad when you're in the golden age, but throughout the rest of the game going forward, it does make it harder to get your normal ages and golden ages because you've already taken up and wasted some of the era score that was available to you. The Historic Moment Wiki, your best friend when it comes to checking out era score. I'm going to put this link in the description. The Civ Wiki is the best place to go to learn about anything civilization or just get a little more detail on it. I use the wiki all the time. If we scroll down this page to the list of historic moments, it'll tell you almost, not quite all, I don't think, but almost all the ways that you can collect era score in the game. You can sort it by moment, you can't sort it by description, just kidding. You can sort it by era score, you can sort it by the eras. It's so much fun to look through this. Let's sort it by era score, so things that give you 1 era score will come here, things that give you 2 era score will come next, and you can see we just keep scrolling down. Now we're getting to the big chunky monkeys that are gonna give us loads of era score. Basically, this is a big, fat, conveniently located list that you can just reference anytime if you're in a pinch and need era score in your games, or you're just trying to learn what gives you era score and what doesn't. But there are a few things we need to talk about on this chart. I'm not going to be able to go through every example for each one of these things, but the first thing we're going to talk about is that some opportunities for era score only happen in certain eras, and this chart will tell you that. For instance, we call them goody huts, but they're actually called tribal villages. If you step on a tribal village or a goody hut, it will give you 1 era score, but it will only give you 1 era score until the ancient era is over. So basically what this chart is telling you is that you can collect goody huts throughout the entire game, but if you find a goody hut or a tribal village in the modern era, it's not going to give you this 1 era score, because the maximum era you can collect era score from it is the ancient era. So when you're looking through this chart, just keep in mind that some ways of collecting era score have an expiry date. Tribal villages are a great example. Another thing to keep in mind is that some abilities to get era score, some things you can do to achieve that era score, you can do anytime up until a certain era ends. For instance, your first bustling city, a city has reached 10 population for the first time in your civilization. It doesn't have a minimum era. It's there the whole time, but you have to do it before the industrial era ends. And so that's basically what this chart is telling you. Some have a minimum era though, where it doesn't start until a certain time. Then the maximum era is up until this era ends, not when it begins. So you have until the industrial era ends to finish this up. Like we mentioned earlier, though, this means that some ways of collecting era score have some sort of expiry date. If you do not collect this 1 era score before the industrial era is gone, it is now gone. It's wasted. You can never get it back. That opportunity is gone. So managing all of this can be a little bit crazy. The next thing we need to keep in mind is that some things are only available to the first person in the game to do them. That means if you're playing on a lower difficulty, it is more likely to be you. If you are playing on a higher difficulty, it is more likely that this will not be available as somebody has done it first. A good example of that would be the world's first army. The world's very first army is formed under your command, right? So if we aren't the first person to form an army, then we don't get this extra era score. This 2 era score only goes to the person who constructs the world's first army. You have the world's first armada, same type of thing. World's first corps, world's first enormous city. So all of these world's first means if you don't do them before any of the other AI, then that opportunity is gone. It's only available to the first person to do all of these things. There are also things in the game that will give you more era score for having done it first, but will still give you era score for having done it at all. A good example of this is Circumnavigation. World's first Circumnavigation will give you 5 era score, but if you scroll back up to just regular world circumnavigated here, it gives you 3. So what that means is if you circumnavigate the world first, you're gonna get 5, but if you do it at all, you're gonna get 3, which means you still wanna go and do it to get that 3 era score, but getting it first will give you that extra 2 that's only available to the first person to do it. I would encourage everyone to read through this list just to realize how many things that give you era score you're just doing anyway. Obviously, if you don't understand era score, your era score is not going to be 0 the whole game. There are a lot of things in here that you just kind of accidentally do, but understanding what you're doing to get the era score can help you manage it and time it in a way to make sure you're getting the most amount of golden ages as possible. For instance, building good districts give you era score, right? Every time you build a splendid district here, a campus that gives you +3 science, a harbor that gives you +4 gold, etc. Those are things you want to do anyway, and doing them will give you era score. So going through and finding things you know you want to do anyway, and things that will give you era score is kind of the best way to manage it early on. There are some things in here that you don't really want to do anyway, and you're kind of going to go out of your way to do. A good example of this would be a general defeating an enemy. This is something that happens all the time in a domination game, but if you're not going domination, this is something if you wanted this 2 era score, you'd have to go out of your way to do. You have to build the encampments, get the great general, declare war on someone. Like, it's a process to get this era score if it's not something that you are doing in your natural path of the gameplay, and this is something I'm not doing every game. So it's just good to know there are things on this list that you will have to go out of your way to do if you're trying to get them. Also good to know that, like, all of the things on this list are not things you're going to do every game. Some games are easier to do some things than others. Religion, there's a lot of era score things based on our religion. Not everyone can even have a religion in the game, right? So just look at the list, read the list, but don't get overwhelmed. A lot of these things are things you're going to be doing anyway, and a lot of these are things that won't be available to you every game, but knowing the list more off by heart and understanding how it works a little bit will help you in your games. When you hop into a game of Civ and you're playing along here, sometimes you get era score in a very obvious way. You do something or you complete something and a big pop-up comes on your screen. It's like, ah, you got a bunch of era score, and you're like, hooray. Sometimes it's more subtle, and that's why knowing that list is important, because it helps you track how things are going in your game. For instance, I know that the first time you build a horse-based unit, so as a horseman, courser, doesn't matter. The first time you build any horse-based unit, you get 1 era score. I know that in this game, I have not built a horse-based unit. I have 133 era score if we just click right here or look at the bottom. If I buy a horse-based unit, I should go up to 134. Let us buy a courser here with 800 gold, and boom, I'm up to 134. The reason why I wanted to point this out is because it shows you how easily you can go way over your kind of maximum era score without even realizing it, right? The other reason I wanted to point this out is that these are things that kind of just happen and you don't really think about, but timing these things for the right eras is really, really important and can really help you out. If you don't need a horse unit, saving your horse unit until you need the era score can be very helpful. If you're not planning on going to war in a game, don't build a horse unit right away. You can just save it. Like, why not? Why not save it to just buy later whenever you need a little boost in era score? It's really important to keep track of these little things that give you era score, because the last thing you want to do is you want to get to a point where you have, let's say we have 1 turn left, you have 145 score, you need 146. You're like, hey, I watched a YouTube video one time where that dude told me all I needed to do for 1 era score was to buy a horseman. So you go, you spend 800 gold on a courser, but you've already had a horseman. Maybe you had one earlier and it died. Maybe you forgot about it. Keeping track of this is awesome because it also helps you not waste gold later or waste time on effort on trying to get era score that you already got but didn't realize. Also worth noting just really quickly while we're here that buying units from the barbarians also counts for this era score. So if you don't have the ability to like build a galley or something, you can still buy one from the barbarians, and that'll count as owning your first kind of boat vessel thing or horse or iron unit or whatever. Same applies with levying. If you're trying to get those era score bonuses, levying also applies to them, which is awesome. Now it's time to talk about era score management, and this is where things get a little bit tricky and where people have the most amount of questions. So I'm going to try my best to explain my approach to this in as simple a way as possible. The big caveat with what I'm about to say here is that it very heavily depends on the game of Civ you're playing and the state of the game you're playing. So just keep in mind, being a little flexible with anything I'm about to say is important. Just like with any advice in Civilization 6, it's not always going to apply to every single game and situation. Anyways, the basic thing that I have done, and that's mostly through playing, not that I went through with like a highlighter, but I've looked at the list of era score or things that give us era score, those historic moments, and I've tried to figure out which are things that I can hold off on doing if I ever want to manage my era score, and which are things that I want to do anyways. Now remember, this only ever really applies if you're already over the max for your era. So if you need 160 for a golden age and you're at like 150 or something and you're not going over 160, you don't usually have to worry about managing your era score. It's more like you're approaching the top and you still got 26 turns left. How are you going to make sure you don't go too far over? That's what I'm talking about with era score management. Not I'm 30 era score back, how do I get a whole bunch? But mostly, how do I manage it so I'm not going over and wasting era score in the next era? A good example of a time where I would waste era score and go over is you'll notice on the list there's one there that says settling near floodplains or settling on floodplains. I can't remember exactly what it says, but that will give you era score. So settling this city here will give me a little bit of era score. If I have 26 turns till the next era and I already have 160, I don't like, not having a city for 26 turns is so not worth going over in the era score. So I would totally settle the city anyway and go over the era score, and I would still call that era score management. It's so much more valuable to put the city down than it is to worry at all about going over on the era score. Something like circumnavigation, though, which is kind of going around the whole map and stepping on one tile in each of the vertical axes on the map. It doesn't need to connect through the map, but circumnavigation basically means circling the whole map. That is something I always hold off on if I'm already over in era score. So if I know I'm about to circle the whole map and circumnavigate, whether that's giving me 5 era score or 3 era score, I will always just stop my units and wait until I'm not over the era score anymore, so I don't waste that era score. That's a very low risk thing to just stop doing until the era score can be better utilized. So if I was anywhere under the golden age, I would just keep circumnavigating. But if I was already getting close or going over, I would probably just stop what I'm doing. I can circumnavigate in the next era. There's no need to waste that era score. Now, obviously, I can't go through the whole list and tell you, like, these are all, the list had like 80 things on it or something. I can't tell you all the situations in which I would stop doing this or do this anyways, but definitely look at the list. If you see something like building a +3 campus for the first time gives you era score, right? If you're building a +3 campus to give yourself the era score and you have 15 turns left, right, and you're gonna go over, do you want to give up, what is that, 45 science? Do you want to give up 45 science just for the era score? That's a determination you can make in your game, but these are the questions you have to ask yourself, because it might be worth doing anyways in some games, but in some games, if you're already way ahead in science over everyone else, like, do you really need that second, or can you wait until the next era? So these are the kinds of questions you're going to need to ask, but if you're under the era score, don't even worry about it. It's usually only applicable if you're going over. Now, I know the question you're probably asking is, well, VB, that's all well and good if I'm routinely going over era score in my ages, but my problem is I'm always in Dark Ages and can't even get enough era score. What is your advice for me? And I hate to be redundant, but honestly, the best advice I can give you is just read through the list and make sure you're doing the easy things to do on that list. Building one good district of every type is an easy thing to do. There are some things that, like, you want to do anyways, like settling near natural wonders. That is usually a fairly easy thing to do if you have a natural wonder nearby that you're probably going to settle anyway. So just make sure you're doing those easy to do things. Like early on, get some scouts out, go find the goodie huts, go clear the barb camps. Both of those things have a cap. You can only do those for so long. So you want to get that era score while you can, because later in the game, you won't be able to. I will share with you two of my favorite ways to kind of hype up era score though in the game. And these are not the only ways to get extra era score. I'm sure people will put in the comments if there are, but there are a few things you can do if you want to cheese the era score a bit. And these are my two favorite ways. The first is the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is a great wonder. I really enjoy it. It comes in at humanism, so it comes in pretty early in the game. +1 era score from historic moments earned after this wonder is complete. If that moment is usually worth 2 or more era score. So if you build the Taj Mahal and you go look at the list of things that give you era score, everything that's in that 2 category or higher will give you an additional era score if you own the Taj Mahal. So if you are struggling with era score, or you've just watched this video and you're like, hey, I'm gonna go memorize this list, I'm gonna get this all down, how do I kind of leverage myself or give myself some space and time to learn that? Just build the Taj Mahal in your games. The Taj Mahal is gonna add era score to so many of the things that you do anyways in the games to get era score that you're just getting this nice +1 bonus every once in a while. And I found that most games I build Taj Mahal, it just completely avoids Dark Ages and I don't even have to worry about them. I can mostly just chill in regular and Golden Ages with the Taj Mahal and not have to think about it too hard. So the Taj Mahal is a great wonder to build in most games, especially if you're trying to learn and pay attention to era score. This will give you a little bit of leverage to start with. Another one of my favorite ways to get era score is via national parks. If you set up enough national parks to get, they will be pretty much an unlimited source of era score. Now, this isn't possible in all games to really maximize your era score from this, because some games you just have more national parks than others. And if you're not familiar with national parks, that's a whole other conversation we're going to have another time. But basically, every time you build a national park, you get a load of era score. So here we are, I'm going to build one right here. This is my first national park, so I'm gonna get 4 era score, 5 if you have the Taj Mahal, so you can combine this with the Taj Mahal strategy we just talked about. So I got 4 for that first national park, and now you're thinking, well, I bet you don't get more era score every time you build a national park. You would be thinking completely wrong, because every time I build a national park, I'm gonna get another 3 era score, which is awesome. This is also a great example of those times where the era score pops up on the screen that I was talking about earlier. Those times it's like, era score. You click this and it's like, oh my god, big thing. You got 3 era score. It tells you right here. So a little less subtle than buying the Horseman earlier. But national parks are a great way to get era score. They're not unlocked till later in the game, so they're not that useful early, and they're not that useful in all games. But in games where you can plant some woods and set up a few national parks and you have the faith to do that, it is a really good way to get a whole lot of era score there. Another thing to keep in mind with era score is that every civ has a built-in way to get at least 8 era score, which is awesome. And I'm not thinking of anyone that doesn't have at least 8 era score built in. You're going to get 4 era score for building any kind of unique district or building to your civ, or building any kind of unique unit to your civ. This isn't particularly helpful for getting the era score in the era you need it all the time. Obviously, everyone's unique districts and units come at a varied point throughout the game. But if you were playing Frederick here, you would get 4 era score for building the Hansa because that's unique to Germany, and 4 era score for building the U-boat because that's unique to Germany. So that's 8 era score total. If you were playing Bad Trio as Vietnam, you get 4 for the Than and 4 for the Voi Chen. I'm sure you guys are kind of understanding what I'm saying here, is that for anything unique to your civ, the first time you build it, you will get 4 era score. Another thing to consider is that sometimes your era bonuses also give you era score. These are called your dedications. These are the abilities you pick at the start of each era, depending on which age you fell into. Talking about all these abilities will be for another video. Like I said, this one's already really long, and we're just talking about score today. But specifically, if you have a normal age pretty early on, free inquiry dedication bonus. This is the one that I selected for hitting a normal age. Gain +1 era score each time you trigger a Eureka. So every time I trigger a Eureka in this era, while this is activated, I will get +1 era score. So sometimes just when the eras change over, you can pick your dedication. If you pick a dedication, I'm going to leave it to you to pick the ones you think are best every game. But if you pick a dedication that gives you era score, that is a way to unlock era score just specifically in that era for you. So if you want to make sure you get as many Eurekas as possible in this era, every single time you get one, you will get +1 era score. But if this era ends and I choose something else, this ability to get era score is lost to me. It's only available in the era you selected in. I think that's going to do it for this era score video. I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of interweaving things here, like dedications will be another video, even though they are very closely tied to era score. The main takeaways from this video should be that you want to do your best to try and avoid going over this golden age in era score, whatever number this says here, because any era score over that just gets wasted in the calculation for the next era's score requirements. The other thing to take away is go read the list from the wiki. It is in the description below. Familiarize yourself with all the different ways to collect era score. This is going to help you manage it better. This is going to help you make sure you are doing those things early on to get era score so you can avoid those pesky dark ages here. Generally, just make sure you are more familiar with all those ways to get era score, because that will help you out. Helps you keep track of what you've already done in a game as well. If you are struggling a little bit, make sure you build the Taj Mahal in your games. That'll help you get a grip on era score while also making sure you avoid dark ages more regularly while you're kind of learning and understanding it. The other thing I should probably address, and I won't talk about it too much because it'll be for another video, but this is very important. The difference between a dark, normal, and golden age, one of the biggest differences between the two is loyalty. The last thing you want to do is get like 3/4 of a way through a game. You've set up your empire, everything's going well, then you hit a dark age and lose all your cities to loyalty. That's why it's important not to go over, right? I know a lot of people who play Civ really early on go, well, does it even matter if I go over? Does it matter if I hit a dark age or a normal age or a golden age? It does matter a lot, not only for the dedication bonuses, but for specifically the loyalty that kind of moves your empire back and forth. And a poorly timed dark age can really throw you back in a game, and that's what we're trying to avoid by keeping track of our era score and making sure we don't go over. So I'll go over that in another video, kind of like looking through each different age. But in terms of how the score affects it, it is genuinely important to try and avoid dark ages as much as you can, and not go too far over the golden age as much as you can. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to let me know. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Put your video suggestions there. Tell me anything I missed, anything you think I got wrong, etc. Make sure you say thank you to Onvars for editing the video. That'll be all for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.